C'est juste là. Très cool. Peut-être ça va changer. J'espère. Sounds freaking good. Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue à Blabla Katie. My name is Katie and today we're going to blah blah about French alphabet pronunciation for beginners. We are bringing it back to the basics for anyone who's just starting out learning French or anyone who needs to brush up on the fundamentals. By the end of this video, you'll have learned the names of French consonants and vowels as well as their sounds. C'est parti! As usual, we're starting out with a pre-assessment for the names of French letters. There are going to be several parts to this pre-assessment. You should be looking at all of the French letters on the screen and you'll see that the French alphabet is pretty much the same as the English alphabet in looks. I'm going to say the names for 5 letters and all you have to do is find them. As always, I recommend that you write down your answers so that when we do the same activities later in the video, you'll be able to see if you made any progress or if you need to hone in on certain repetitive mistakes. D, E, H, G, W. For the second part of this assessment, I'm going to light up 5 different letters consecutively. When you see the letter that is lit up, try to say the name of the letter out loud. During the pre-assessment, you had all of the letters from the alphabet on your screen, but I don't actually want to go one by one to give you the names of these letters. I'm more concerned with you being able to identify and pick out any letter at any point in time, regardless of its order in the alphabet. So instead of going through and doing the French alphabet song with you, I'm instead going to make a couple of different divisions in the alphabet. First, we're going to divide the consonants from the vowels, and we're going to look at the consonants first. There are tons more consonants than there are vowels, so I've divided this group further into 3 subgroups. The first are consonants that are not exactly the same as consonants in English, but are pretty similar. There's F, L, but faites attention because the L in French is slightly different from the L in English. When you make the L in English, you're touching your front teeth with the tip of your tongue. But when you're making the L sound in French, you're actually taking the tip of your tongue and having it touch up here. It's called the alveolar ridge. It's above the back of your teeth and it's kind of the bumpy thing on your gum. Just feel around with your tongue for a little bit, you will find it, but that's where the L is for French. L, L. In the same group, there's also M, N, S, and Z. The next group are consonants that end with the E sound. You'll want to note that this E sound is not A. In English, we have a tendency to kind of draw out our vowels, but it's really more of an open-ended E. This group is easy to memorize because they all more or less rhyme. In this group, there's B, C, D, G, P, T, V, and W. I know that there are 2 letters in there that are maybe a little difficult for English speakers, but I will get to that in the next subgroup, which is actually consonants that are difficult for English speakers for one reason or another. Starting with the letter G, this is not J. J is actually in English G. You also want to pay attention to the sound of this name itself. It's J. There's also H, J, and again, faites attention because this is not G, this is J. So in French, J and J are flipped from what they are in English. And again, make sure that you are paying attention to the J sound as opposed to the hard J. Then there's K, Q, R. This is another letter that I made a whole video on because it is so difficult. So if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out. And we have W. This translates to double V, which is obviously different from our word, which is W, but that's what it is in French, W. Then there's X. And finally, we have Y. This literally translates to the Greek I. And just like in English, Y can be a consonant and a vowel. In this section of the video, I'm just going to treat it like a consonant and I will get to the vowel part of it in the next section. So to run through those one more time, consonants that are almost or are exactly the same as in English: F, L, M, N, S, Z. Consonants that end in the E sound: B, C, D, G, P, T, V, W. And finally, consonants that are tricky for English speakers specifically: G, H, J, K, Q, R, W, X, Y. As always, pause, rewind, play as many times as you need to get down the names of these letters, and then we can move on to the next activity. Again, you should be looking at all of the letters of the French alphabet. I'm going to take away the vowels, so you will just be left with the consonants. I'm also going to change the colors of each letter depending on the subgroup they're in. If they're in the group that is similar to English letters, they're going to be blue. If they're in the subgroup of consonants that end with the eh sound, they're going to be in red. And if they are consonants that are difficult for English speakers, then they're going to be in green. First, I'm simply going to give you some consonants. You have to find them, and after a couple of seconds, I will circle the correct letter so you know if you were right or not. P. K. M. C. R. W. Y. Now you are going to actually produce the names of these letters. I'm going to consecutively circle different consonants. Your job is to simply produce the name of the letter. After a few seconds, I will give you the correct name of each letter. Z. J. J. Q. D. As always, rewind and practice for as many times as you need before moving on to the next part of the video, which is going to be names of vowels. Luckily, there are so many less vowels than consonants in the French alphabet. The French vowels consist of A, E. The way that I try to explain to people to pronounce the E sound is to act like something just hit you in the gut and you say like that. Then we have I. Faites attention, I is I. Then there's O, and you might be thinking, Katie, this is so easy, it's the same thing. Almost. Be very, very careful. This letter is not O, it's O. Very small, very circular, O. Then we have U. If you are having problems with this U sound, go check out my last video. I think it'll give you a lot of practice and a lot of clarity as to how to pronounce the sound correctly. And finally, there is again Y, this time as a vowel. To go through them again, we have A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. We're going to do the same mini activity that we did with the consonants. Hopefully this will be a little easier just because there are so many less vowels than there are consonants. First, I'm going to say all of the vowels in a random order, and your job is to number them from 1 to 6, 1 being the first vowel that I say and 6 being the last, and I will give you the correct order after. U, I, Y, E, O, A, and now very quickly I am going to change the color of each vowel simultaneously. All you have to do is say the name of the letter and I will give you the correct name in just a few seconds after each one. A, O, E, U, Y, I. Okay, I hope that round was a little easier than consonants, but of course, make sure you go back and try to practice anything that is still giving you a little bit of difficulty. Now that we've gone over both the names for consonants and vowels, I'm going to give you the same activities as the pre-assessment, with the answers following close behind. D, E, H, G, W, O, Z, Y. J, Ka. If you feel pretty good with the names of both consonants and vowels in French, then we can move on to the actual sounds for these letters. First up is your pre-assessment, which should not be a surprise at this point. There's only one part to this assessment. You're going to see some words on the screen and you just have to do your best to pronounce them. Unfortunately, sometimes, and by sometimes I mean a lot of the time, there are letters in French that are silent. So if that's the case, these letters are in black. That means you should not worry about pronouncing them. All right, let's get into the sounds of the consonants. Lots of these consonant sounds are actually the same as in English. For example, B or B is B. So I don't want to go through every single one, but I do want to point out certain difficulties or variations that English speakers might not be aware of. First, I want to talk about C and J. Remember that J is not J, it is G, and it is a different sound altogether. J. With C and J, you have two different options for sounds. You have either a hard sound, K and G, or you have the soft sounds, S and J. If C or J is followed by a consonant, for example by R, then you are going to use the hard sound. Accro, accro. And for the J, grand, grand. They are also going to be hard K and G sounds if they are followed by the vowels A, O, or U. For example, gare, couleur, cul-de-sac, etc. Whereas if C and J are followed by E or I, then they're going to be pronounced with soft sounds, S and J. For example, pouce, cible, rage, tangible. It's honestly just easier if you think, okay, C and J are going to be hard sounds unless they're followed by these two vowels, E and I. There's also the sound for H. It actually just isn't pronounced. The H is always silent. Even if you have an English word that French people use, like hamburger, you're going to say hamburger, hamburger. There's no hamburger. It does not work like that. H is silent. Similar to J, I wanted to point out that J is a similar sound. There's only one sound for J, and it's the soft J. We already went over L, but make sure you're keeping your tongue in your mouth, touching your alveolar ridge, the bumpy thing right here. Of course, there's also the R. I did a whole video on it specifically because it's so hard. You should definitely check that out if you're having issues with this letter. The next letter is S. Similar to C and J, there are two different variations of the sound. You can either have the soft S sound, or the hard Z sound. This will depend on the two letters that are directly next to S. If we take the example of désert and dessert, you can hear désert has the hard Z sound, and S is in between two vowels. If you take the word dessert, it's the soft S sound, and it's a double S. You can also have a soft S sound when S is in between any consonant and a vowel. For example, the word masque. S is in between A and Q, a vowel and a consonant, so it is a soft S sound. And finally, we have Y. Y, like in English, can be both a consonant and a vowel, but the sound when it's a consonant is the Y sound. For example, Y. If we move on to the vowel sounds, luckily these are a bit easier with the variations. The letters A, I, O, and U have exactly the same sounds as their names are. A, age, I, il, O, robot, U, tutu. The letter E is a bit trickier. There are actually 3 different ways to pronounce the E, and this is going to depend on certain accent marks that are used with E or on the letters that come before and after this letter. So I'm actually going to make my next video on the pronunciation for the letter E, but for now we're just going to focus on one of the sounds, which is the same as its name, the E sound. You can find this E sound in French words that only have one syllable, for example, le, me, te, ce, or at the beginning of French words that have more than one syllable, for example, debout, dessous, etc. And lastly, Y, when it is a vowel, it's actually the same as the I. For example, cyclisme. And I should note that I is a consonant when it's at the beginning of a word or syllable, whereas when it's not at the beginning of a word or syllable, then it is the vowel sound. You can see here that Y is the vowel because the syllable that it's in, Y is not at the beginning of it. Cyclisme. For your final assessment, this is going to be the same thing as before. There are going to be certain words on the screen and you're going to try to read them to the best of your ability. Any letters that are silent are going to be blacked out so you know not to pronounce them. Garage. rival, ridicule, justice, dessus. If you still have any questions on the French alphabet pronunciation or the names of letters, please do put them in the comments down below. I would love to respond to you personally. And of course, if you got any value out of this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And I think that's all for now. À la prochaine!